Today we're going to be tackling one of the toughest health issues facing all industrialized countries, and that's obesity. Human fatness, we can say that. We shouldn't glorify it, we shouldn't celebrate it, we shouldn't put a big ribbon on it and call it normal. The real epidemic going on in the world is the diseases that are contributed to by being obese and overweight. And so today we're going to dive into why that is the case. And stay with me all the way through, because I'm also going to be talking about some really high advanced strategies if you are doing everything right and struggling on how to plateau and get your body weight to a healthy place. Make sure you also hit the like and subscribe button. Share this video with people that you love. Together we can help save more people. Remember, hashtag save 100 million lives. Let's dive into why are we so fat? So when we look at statistically how bad is the problem, and these are US statistics taken by the very CDC who keeps track of these numbers, we have 1 in 5 children, which is horrific. That's 20%. And then we have 1 in 3 adults that struggle with obesity. Now, obesity is not the same thing as being overweight. Obesity is like a stage worse. So we're talking about 1 in 5 kids and 1 in 3 adults. So this is a major, major issue. And the problem has gotten worse. As a matter of fact, since the 60s, we have seen a quadrupling of the amount of obese individuals in the US, kids and adults. That's a quadrupling, so a 4-fold increased risk. Now, what's changed since the 1960s to today? We're going to talk about that. Adults with obesity have higher risk for developing heart disease, type 2 diabetes, as well as cancer. And if you look at what is arguably the #1 cause of death in the US is heart disease. Number 2 is cancer. Now, I would argue number 3 is autoimmune disease, which is chronic autoimmune inflammation. And then I would actually also argue for the use of medications. There have been some major publications that have come out that have actually calculated that medications account for one of the leading causes of death in industrialized countries, and the very same medications that we use to treat heart disease, to treat cancer, to treat autoimmune disease. So again, the top 3 causes of death, all related to obesity. The way we treat those top 3 causes of death, medications, is also a top cause of death. So we're not getting anywhere, we're spinning our wheels, and so we have to come back and ask, why is this happening? Well, one of the biggest reasons is obesogens. Now, what's an obesogen? If this is the first time you're ever hearing this word, we've been studying chemicals and pollutants in the environment that have endocrine effects on the body. What does that mean? That means these chemicals mimic many of our hormones or disrupt many of our hormones. And the way they disrupt them is some of them increase fat storage, some of them increase or rather decrease our ability to process glucose, which leads to fat storage. And so these are really the 2 biggest components behind obesogens as chemicals. So again, many of them cause our bodies or tell our bodies to store more fat, many of them and hinder our ability to process carbohydrate energy. And so then we take that excessive carbohydrate, we can't process it, and we turn it into fat and store it. So where do we find obesogens? Where are the primary locations, and how do we avoid them? So number 1, plastics and cosmetics. Now, if you've ever heard that term BPA, you can also see BPC or BPB, bisphenol or phthalates. These are forms of phthalates, if you've heard that term. They're plasticizers. They make plasticier, if that's a word, right? So they make things basically pliable and bendable. And so we use these in things like plastic water bottles. We use them in food containers. We use them for a huge variety of packaging of different things that we're exposing ourselves to. We also see these same compounds in cosmetics, these phthalate compounds in cosmetics. And so ladies, I know you like to look good, but when you douse your face in chemicals that absorb through your skin Obesogens, right, you increase your risk of developing this problem. And I think women are actually at greater risk in today's world than men, not picking on women. It's just that men typically, obviously, well, some do, but men typically don't wear cosmetics, right? And so we don't have men being exposed to that, at least to that every single day. We also know research shows that women typically are more germophobic. And so like things like hand sanitizers, especially those with a chemical called triclosan, those are obesogens as well. So we get, again, plastics, if you're drinking out of plastic water bottles, eating off of plastic plates, using plastic forks, going to get fast food where the plastic box is coated with a phthalate plastic that leaches into your food, or the wrapper around the burger which leaches the chemical plastics into your food. Like, these are things that you're being exposed to that are driving hormone disruption to tell your body to store fat. Then we add the fact that pesticides and fungicides and other chemicals are also obesogens. So, if you're not eating organic, which is, why eating organic, one of the reasons why it's so important, and the more control you have over the source of your food, the better, because, some would argue that, the organic system is fudged, right? And that a lot of manufacturers cheat that system. And I would agree they're probably right. And so then how do you protect yourselves? Well, best thing you can do is buy from local farmers and local farmers markets, or potentially even grow a lot of your own food. That way you can ensure it's organic and doesn't have all the pesticide exposure. The things like glyphosate and atrazine and other fungicides that, again, that create an obesogenic effect on the body. And then, of course, we spray our yards with pesticides as well. And so, then your dogs go out and walk through the grass and bring that stuff back into your house, and then you're being exposed in that way as well. So, think about how much this plays a role in your day-to-day, right? So, these are very common things: plastics, cosmetics, pesticides, and hand sanitizers. Then we move into some of the other things that play a role in a lot of people's lives on a day-to-day basis. PFAs, that stands for perfluoroalkyl substances. And so these are also sometimes referred to as forever chemicals because they don't break down very readily, and so they stay in the water and in the environment and in the atmosphere. And one of the ways that people get PFASs, or perfluoroalkyl substances, is synthetic packaging, food packaging particularly. So again, fast food restaurants. One of the other big places that we're seeing people get a ton of these right now is masks. So if you're still wearing a mask, those masks, especially those N95s, the ones that are waterproof to a certain extent, they have that almost like a lacquer sprayed on them. That lacquer is made out of perfluoroalkyl substances. There was a research study done during the pandemic that showed that exposure to PFAs reduced immune function. So again, if you're wearing one of these all day long because you're scared that your immune system can't help protect you, you're exposing yourself to these chemicals that act as obesogens but also lower your immune function. So you may want to think that over next time you're faced with that decision. And then we also have a number of different medications. And there are a lot of different medications that can drive obesity. One of the most common are steroid medications, particularly the corticosteroids like prednisone. These drugs are actually known, when people take them long-term, to cause diabetes. They cause muscle loss, they cause bone loss, they cause calcium, magnesium, zinc, and vitamin C deficiency. And part of why they cause diabetes is because they cause an elevation in blood sugar. Even if you're not eating sugars, they cause your blood sugar to go up. Your liver stores extra sugar, and corticosteroids tell your liver to dump that extra sugar into your bloodstream. So you get this constant increase in blood sugar that leads to fat storage. Another steroid hormone that's a known obesogen is estrogen. Now, one of the ways many of these other chemicals cause obesity is because they mimic estrogen. Some of these chemicals are called estrogen mimickers. And this is one of the reasons also why women struggle more typically, not always, but typically, than men with greater weight gain. We actually see that, if we look at, again, from the 60s to today, women on average are weighing more than men on average. So we see that weight gain accordingly more in women. Again, not to pick on women, but what do women make? Estrogen, more of it. And then they're also being exposed to all these environmental estrogens. And so you've got to keep that in mind. So a lot of the phthalates, the chemicals in cosmetics that we were talking about a minute ago, mimic estrogen and can, again, affect you in that way. And we also know that other drugs like antihistamines, so if you take antihistamines on the regular, they can actually drive up obesity. We also know that antipsychotics, so if you're on psychotic medication, like for like Geodon or Abilify, these are some of the antipsychotic meds, they actually cause diabetes and increase weight gain as well. So just be aware of that, right? And if you're on these drugs, that, you know, some of you may need them and some of you may need to be asking a different question, which is, why do I need these drugs? What could I change in my diet and my lifestyle that would no longer, where I would no longer need to take these medications because I'm making the right choices? But medications are a number of different kinds that can cause, these are cause obesity, but these are some that are the more commonly prescribed ones. Then we have food additives. And so this, you know, we've got dyes, you know, preservatives. A lot of the preservatives are artificial antioxidants. If you've ever seen on a package BHT or BHQ, those are artificial or synthetic antioxidants used to preserve processed and packaged foods. These are common examples of food additives that are types of obesogens. We also know that MSG, monosodium glutamate, which is a very common food additive, it also drives obesity. So, you know, check your labels. You should when you're reading your packages, you should not have a hard time pronouncing any of the terms. You shouldn't need a scientific degree to be able to know what something is. When you're looking at your food label, you should see real food ingredients, and if you see a bunch of preservatives, you want to think, how is this going to impact me? How is this going to potentially drive obesity? And then we also have vaccines. Now these here are one of the ingredients, and there was a study done years ago looking at mercury content, because we know that mercury is a neurotoxin as just one of its effects or impacts on the body. It's a poison to humans, but there was a major study done where they looked at non-vaccinated versus the other and the mercury exposure, and they found that the ones that got the most mercury exposure through these actually had more risk of developing obesity as they moved on into life. And so beyond that, there are a number of other chemicals and adjuvants found in these shots that you want to be aware of that can drive obesity as well. Now, let's look at some of the science. So, we're just so you know, we're just scratching the surface. What I'm trying to do today is make you aware that there's this toxic soup out there that you're being exposed to every day. So if you're exercising your butt off, if you're eating superior and you're still struggling, this is what you need to go back and start thinking about, this toxic soup that you're being exposed to every day. So this was a research study published in 2019. Obesity is considered to be a 20th century pandemic, and its prevalence correlates with the increasing global pollution and the presence of chemical compounds in the environment. So key here, we're talking about obesogens, chemical compounds that can drive excessive fat storage. So you can see here, these two graphics here, so let me move that out of the way, basically illustrate a number of the different chemicals that can drive this process. So you can see here synthetic hormones, plastics. We talked about BPA a moment ago. We talked about phthalates as well. Pesticides and fungicides, there are a number of different varieties of these that drive obesity. Solvents that are used in major processing like PCBs or polychlorinated biphenyls. Notice this word chlorinated and brominated. What are those? Those are halides. What do halides do? They block iodine uptake. Why is that important? Where does iodine go? It goes to your thyroid. And what does your thyroid do? Your thyroid sets your metabolic function, your metabolism. We always talk about, I have a slow metabolism. You hear that a lot. I have a slow metabolism. And it's not so much that a person has a slow metabolism as the things they do to themselves or expose themselves to that have the potential to slow down their metabolism. And when you are overexposed to halogenated chemicals with chlorination and bromination and fluoridation, you actually are suppressing your thyroid function and your thyroid's ability to take in iodine, which is critical for its ability to help your metabolism function properly. And then atypical antipsychotics, and then personal care products. Again, I mentioned triclosan earlier. And then a lot of women that take phytoestrogens, especially when they're going through like menopause, these are soy-based compounds like genistein and diadenosine that are phytoestrogens. And so, you have to watch out for excessive quantities of these as well. And of course, a lot of these can be found in processed vegetable oils. Processed vegetable oils derived from soy predominantly. And then you can see over here other environmental factors contributing to the development of obesity. We get a lot of this happening before you're even alive. This is what we would call prenatal exposure. So mom's exposure to environmental toxins and viruses, okay, and then her diet. You can see her maternal diet with a high glycemic index. These are all risk factors for babies developing or turning into little butterballs as they get older. So then you have postnatal exposure. Again, environmental toxins or obesogens, high carbohydrate diets, lack of physical activity, habits which lead to less physical activity, such as TV, computer games, video games, because you get displacement of physical activity through those behaviors. And then you can see all these other things and all these other outcomes: depression and metabolic rate, adverse effect on diet quality, effects of television on sleep, shortened sleep duration. And then you got down here medications again, neuroepileptics, antiepileptics, and then glucocorticoids. And then even antibiotics. There's now a lot of research coming out on disruption in the microbiome contributing to obesity as well. So again, it's a chemical soup that you're being exposed to, and this chemical soup can cause you to become overweight.